At 6:30, I'm calling the meeting to order. Excited players. I need my gavel. I need a gavel. If we could do, all right. Mr. Cusick, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Present.
Mr. Wilson.
Here. Okay, welcome everyone. Again, another exciting night for us as school board members to honor some outstanding students. But first, let me introduce those of us who are up here in front of you. To your far right here is board member Kelly Davis. Next to her is board member Jennifer Best. Next to me here is our treasurer, TJ Cusick. I'm Charlie Wilson. I have the honor of being the school board president this year. Next to me is our superintendent, Dr. Trent Bowers. Next to him is our board vice president, Nikki Hudson. And to your far left here is board member Amy Lloyd. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Before we vote, I want to point out something. We no longer have addendum, but if you looked at the agenda and reviewed it before this morning, something was added today, and that is that approving my going to the school finance workshop this Friday. My schedule changed, and so I'm able to go to that. And if anyone else wants to go, it's all day, just north of here a ways. But so it's in there in the agenda. We'd have to amend it if anyone else wants to go. We can do that when we get to for the approval. But I didn't want to pull one over on you in case you looked at the agenda earlier. Okay. Any other additions, deletions, amendments of the agenda? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes. The motion to approve the agenda passes. Okay, at this time, it is our great honor to entertain a motion to recognize the 2023 Thomas Worthington State Champion Field Hockey Team.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
In unison.
In unison by the whole board, but let Mr. Cusick figure that out, that we recognize the 2023 State Champion Field Hockey Team. I guess this is a debatable motion. Any discussion? If not, would you please call the roll, Mr. Cusick?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Vice President Nikki Hudson.
Thanks, Charlie. What a pleasure it is tonight. I'm going to start by asking Coach Simonetti to join me up here, if you don't mind. And are any of the assistant coaches here with us this evening? I don't want to leave anyone out. Please, come on up. Oh, three. That's fantastic. Terry, if you don't mind, I'll ask you to introduce the coaches. I'll go ahead and call all of the athletes up, and then maybe we can hold our applause till the end. Peyton Frost, Sophia Borghese, Julie Conroy, Meredith Eastep, Macy Morgan, Lauren Byer, Caroline Sprung, Maura Barnofsky, Emmy Welligis, Kira Posey, Molly McClellan, May Conroy, Rowan Casey, Taylor Carnes, L. Pasquinelli, Jaden Gussler, Courtney Stegmiller, thank you all for joining us tonight. It's really remarkable that here we are again. And I think now that all the athletes are up here and the coaches as well, we can give them a huge round of applause. I think everyone is aware, but they had the remarkable task or accomplishment, I should say, of winning for the second year in a row the Ohio State High School Athletic Association State Championship, which is absolutely remarkable. They defeated New Albany 2-1 in overtime. I had the pleasure of watching that game in person. Truly remarkable and a little bit of a nail biter at times. The 2023 Cardinals were led by seniors Lauren Byer. Do you mind just stepping up when I say the senior's name again? Lauren Byer, Maura Barnowski, and Courtney Stegmiller. Congratulations, seniors. And the team finishes the year 21-2. They played teams from Michigan and Kentucky, and they were tasked with playing and beating their rivals Roderson 3 different times on their way to the championship. Really impressive. This is the 8th state championship for field hockey for Thomas Worthington High School, and the 7th out of 8 under the leadership of Terry. Extremely impressive. I've learned that she's also called Tear Bear. So obviously there's a whole lot of love for Coach. The grit and consistency of all of you is absolutely remarkable, and it's truly our pleasure to honor you tonight. I'm going to let your coach say a few words, if that's okay. Do you mind? Okay, and maybe introduce your assist. Yes, please, coaches. Yeah.
This is Emma Anderson, and she also played for me and was a state champion in 2015 and 16, and has been coaching for the past 4 years. Alex Eichert was also a player for me as well and moved on to the University of Louisville to play. And she has been coaching 7 years with us and has won 3 state championships with me as a coach. And Caitlin Bromagen Crystal has been coaching 10 years, maybe with a little hiatus here and there, but 10 years, and has won 5 state championships with me as a field hockey coach. She is the only one on staff that is not a player, but we converted her to be a true Cardinal from the Bexley Lions. So we're thrilled to have her. She's also, obviously, you know that she won the Gary Smith Teaching Award, so it's great to have her on staff as well. You've heard this numerous times, but we have such an incredible team that has grit, determination. Trent's blogged about how he always sees the field hockey players out there starting June 1st, conditioning. It doesn't just start on August 1st thinking that we're going to win. I actually have been putting our program together, and Max Preps ranked us 15th nationally for their strength of schedule, and the best team in the country is 15th. And we were 1 for strength of schedule and 1 in Ohio. So that's pretty impressive. And obviously, I have a freshman goalie, so the expectations are very high to continue winning again. But May, if you were at the game, made some incredible saves to keep us in the game. 1-0 throughout against Paige Cornelius, who had scored 75 goals on the season, which is a feat in itself. So May only allowed her to score once, and then the team just continued to out-corner their team 10-1 in the 4th quarter, and we just kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And the patience on the corner, I've replayed it and reviewed it, and it awes me to see how it's just passing and how deliberate they are with the passing. And then Julie sinks it, and we tie it up with 2:42, like not enough time for our liking. And then obviously Sophia in overtime does it again, and Just send her the ball. E-Step sends her the ball, and she beats 3 defenders and the goalie, and here we are. So great season. Super proud of them. They're not only great athletes, as Pete Scully will confirm this, they are unbelievable students. I didn't know GPAs go that high, and theirs do. And every single one of them was a scholar athlete in Ohio, Central Ohio, NFHCA nationally. It's unbelievable. So, I mean, kudos to them doing the work on and off the field. I introduced my coaches, but I'm not standing here without them. And as you are at the games, you see Bromo running down the stands. She's got, now she walks, but she used to run. Alex with the headset talking to Bromo, and Emma on the sideline and talking to her stat keeper and keeping everybody entertained. But without them and her developing the JV team, which also had a very successful season, we aren't who Thomas Worthington is. So team, coaches, parents, all of you, staff, administration, I can't thank you enough for your support.
That is, no, that is a great segue. I was going to ask Principal Scully and Molly Fiesler to come on up for the photos as well. And a huge round of applause and a great deal of gratitude for your overall support of everything at Thomas Worthington High School, both athletics and academics. And so you guys can come ahead and come up. They both just come And well, we do want to get pictures, and really quickly before we get the pictures, Terry mentioned, but I think that every parent should stand up and let us thank you, because these athletes would not be here if it were not also for your love, encouragement, and support, not just throughout the season, but year round. Oh, Cameron, yes, Cameron. Phil Cameron, yes, yeah. I was saying, Cameron, Phil, will you come up, please? You should come up and get your picture taken as well, please. Yes, you are much loved and appreciated by this team and by the whole athletic group as well. So, with that, we're gonna have to, I think, like take.
They know.
Okay.
So David's not really out front. Are we even, Angie? You're pretty good. Yeah, that looks good. You know how it's good. Thanks so much.
Scully's the only unequal one back there.
Great. Thank you. Congratulations.
Once again, congratulations and thank you for another great season. This is a good time to leave. If you all wish to leave, you are very welcome to stay. It's an open meeting. We'd be glad to have you, but this is a good time to leave if you so wish. Okay, we'll let them go on out here. That's 8 state championships, right? Yep, that's more than all the other programs. Come on, what a phenomenal feat. All right, I've been informed that there are no visitor comments tonight, so we will go right to our presentation of the 5-year forecast. Mr. Cusick.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Probably could have gave bonus points for a government class, maybe, if they would have stayed here. Today is the twice a year exciting time we present the district's 5-year forecast. We update this in November and May. The November forecast is the baseline year. We roll everything over. We move into a new school year, so we'll spend some more detailed time talking about the various line items here tonight. May is just an update, which is usually a little bit briefer. But the forecast serves a couple of different purposes. The first, from a technical lens, it allows us to sign multi-year contracts, labor agreements. You cannot sign a contract that you don't have the money to fulfill. And so it serves a very meaningful purpose in that regard. All of this data across the state funnels into the EMA system, so it allows ODE to monitor school districts that may be coming up on fiscal caution, fiscal watch, or most dreadedly, fiscal overtake. But for our purposes, from a very practical purpose, it allows us to plan long-term levy options, right? So we know, as we'll get into this, we're a locally funded school district that will have to return to voters periodically. And so the forecast serves a very practical purpose here in Worthington of allowing us to plan our future and what that cycle looks like. And so as you'll see in these charts, I finally decided to truncate it. I made it in millions, so you see all these graphs are hopefully a little bit bigger, easier to read. I think Dr. Wilson's been asking for that for quite some time, so I did it right with 2 meetings left for you. The main point of this chart is we are 80% locally funded, right? We know that in Ohio, it's a partnership between the state and the local taxpayer, and as an above average wealth school district, we are predominantly locally funded. 80% of our revenue is from local sources, 75% of that is property taxes. And so if we look at these line items, we'll start at the top, line 1.01 and 1.02. We typically use fancy words here: general property tax, tangible personal property tax. Those are really combined into property taxes. The only tangible property we have left is utility property, and it is collected by the county auditor the same as all other real estate taxes. And so in theory, you could combine those into one, but those 2 lines represent 75% of our revenue. You can see, as the graph below shows, the district passed an incremental operating levy. So we had an additional 2.9 mills go onto the books in calendar year 23, and then an additional 2 mills in 24, 25, and 26. So that will gradually increase collections. But as you see out there in 27 and 28, it eventually flattens out because of House Bill 920. And we'll talk about reappraisal here in a second, but even with reappraisal, that revenue flattens out for suburban districts such as ourselves. And so that's why you see typically in suburban school districts, we return to voters periodically in order to increase that. So you see that levy phasing in and then flattening out. We will talk about a reappraisal that's on everyone's minds. In these numbers includes a 35% increase in reappraised values. There was a bill introduced to try to dial that back. We believe the latest information I have is that the Senate is going to sort of scrap that version and increase the homestead exemption, propose to increase the homestead exemption for seniors and disabled and low income residents. And so there is some risk when we talk about risks at the end, but we've modeled in a 35% increase in reappraisal as compared to 25% before. What does that mean? Well, that means about $1 million a year more in inside mills, right? So because of House Bill 920, we don't get a lot of growth from that. So most people's tax rates are going to decrease dramatically, but it does net us about $1 million a year more in inside mills. And then our last 2 increments, it'll each one of those 2 mill increments will generate about $500,000 more. So as we get to the end, we'll talk about the revisions here and the numbers, but those numbers are included in these numbers here. But you eventually, again, you plateau out. When we look at the next 2 lines, 1.03, 1.04, again, fancy terms: unrestricted state grants and aid, restricted grants and aid. Really, that's state funding, right? So common question is, what's the difference between unrestricted and restricted? Well, going back 20 years, every governor, every legislature has had programs, priorities, initiatives that they have said, we're going to take state funding and ensure you use it toward this initiative, so we're going to restrict it. Basically, we have to account for it separately and report back how we spend it. But when you combine those 2 together, that's our state aid. So in our case, under this governor, it's been student wellness and success funds throughout Governor DeWine's tenure. He's advanced that, and so that's down there in the restricted line, along with gifted EL, targeted assistance, things like that. Worthington doesn't have a problem spending that amount of money in those categories. We spend well in excess of that, so it's just an accounting thing. But combined together, we get about $26 million this year in state aid. And basically, that's a partnership. As you all are probably well aware, the funding formula is driven on property values and income. So it's an inputs-based methodology. They come up with, they take averages throughout the state on various inputs, and they come up with a dollar amount that it takes to educate a child. This year, it's right around $8,200. Last year it was $7,200, so that was the big push this year that got passed, was to increase those inputs with inflation. And so they did. It went up about $1,000 a child, which is good news. But again, for us, our portion of that, roughly $8,000, is $6,000. So we get about 25% state funding on that because of that shared responsibility. And so we've modeled that in here. But if you notice, when the budget came out, right there in the second line of the orange chart, the Legislative Service Commission projected we'd get $26.5 million this year, $27.3 million next year. I am projecting we'll get 26.2, so we're right on target this year. But I'm projecting we're only going to get 23.7 next year, so that's about $4 million less than what the Budget Commission indicated, and that's because of reappraisal, right? The estimates that were given to the legislature had about 7-8% increase in property values. We're looking at 35%. And so I'm going to flip around on you a minute. This is the exact slide I had last year when we talked about this concept. And you can see that the same thing happened in the last budget, right? So we had, in 2020, Franklin County went through an update, a reappraisal update. Our values increased 17%. So we ended up getting $300 less a child in the second year of the budget. So $300 times 10,000 is $3 million. Right now, it was only phased in at 2/6 at that time. It's now going to be phased in at 4/6. So that's why as we go, and I said at the time, and the last bullet, same thing will likely happen in 25, and it will. And so we're going to get 26 million this year. I project that to go down to 23.7 next year. Now, what's unknown is the years beyond that. I've left it flat. If they don't increase the inputs again, like they did this time, then we could likely see less, and we would actually be on what they call the guarantee at what we got in 2021. So as that reappraisal works its way through, because the formula uses a 3-year average, so the more years it uses the higher number, the more impactful it is. But I think, I'm assuming in this forecast that they will increase the inputs again, because that's the drive of the formula, is to always have updated inputs. And the state is in a very healthy financial position. So I've kind of left it flat in the out years, but that, as we talk about risks and uncertainties, that is certainly in jeopardy if the inputs aren't increased. Then we go down to 1.05. We actually were told to change the name on this line to state share of local property taxes. That was a little political gamesmanship there, but that is the homestead and rollback provisions that were in place when the state used to pay 12.5% of every levy. They ended that in the fall of 2013. And as we talked about what might happen, the Senate is proposing to increase the homestead exemption. My assumption is that they will pay for it like they have historically. That may not be the case. So, if they pay for it, then we'll see line 1, property taxes go down. We'll see an offset on line 1.05 go up. If they don't do that, then that would be a loss to the school district. So we'll see what happens. But that is line 1.05. It simply is the homestead and rollback reimbursements. And then the last line, all other revenues. This is all our miscellaneous revenues, predominantly out of the $8.4 million. This is $7 million in interest income. This is what's driving a lot of change in this forecast. Interest rates have stood higher and longer than anyone would have expected. And so we're seeing a fairly good return on investment. And so 7 out of that 8 million is interest income. along with all our other miscellaneous items. So in total, 183.2 million, gradually going up to 198 million and then plateauing. So in summary, what changed since the last time? Again, reappraisal on inside mills and on the increments adds $9.3 million to the tax line. This is cumulative over 5 years, right? So a little less than $2 million a year. State aid, the big change here was in May, we forecasted the governor's proposed budget. The approved budget, again, significantly invested in K-12 public ed, which was good on the short end, but that did come at the bargain of universal vouchers, right? And so long-term, we don't know how that's going to impact us. But in the short end, the state did put a lot of money toward public K-12, and so we've increased state aid over those 5 years, a little more than $9.5 million, and then again, interest revenue is substantially higher. So all in all, over 5 years, we're adding $29.4 million, which seems like a lot of money, is a lot of money in absolute terms, but again, we are the 14th largest district in the state, and that does represent about a 3% change in revenues over that 5-year period. On to expenditures. Again, the pie graph at the bottom tells the story here. We're a service sector employer, and so 75% of our expenditures are on employee wages and benefits. And so we'll drill down into those first two lines, personal services, which are wages, and retirement and insurance. That accounts for 75% of our expenditures. Built into this forecast are our recently negotiated agreements through 2026. And we've also made a significant investment in staffing of our special ed area. We've added 25 additional staff this year. I think that was 5 ISs, a psychologist. Somewhere I have it here. But anyway, we made a daily living skill teacher, EL teacher, reading intervention teacher, psychologist, counselor. So we made a significant investment in targeted area needs. We have in here modest growth. Remember, our enrollment projections, our latest enrollment projections came slightly below our one from 3 years ago. So we've dialed back our growth a little bit. We have 7 positions next year and 4 to 6 in each year thereafter. Again, most of those are in the area of special education. We did receive a significant benefit in savings from retirees. We had over 24 retirees, 23 retirees at the end of last year. That saved over $1 million. We project 7 to 10 annually each year. And then I mentioned this earlier, but the big change in healthcare, we project 8%. That's a medical trend. We were able to hold rates steady and not increase it at all in calendar year 24. So that saves $1.6 million annually. The big thing here, I assume there'll be no changes to retirement contribution rates. I've mentioned this before. The STRS director has come out and indicated a need to increase the employer contribution rate from 14% to 18%. My assumption, if that were to happen, SERS probably would follow suit, although I don't know that for sure. But on $100 million in payroll, 1% is $1 million a year. So that's a significant risk if that were to happen. No bill has been introduced yet. One was introduced last session and died. So we'll see, but I assume that it will remain at 14% in this forecast in these numbers. Purchase service, we'll talk a little bit more about this. This is an area that's probably the fastest growing, although not the largest, but it's certainly seen inflationary growth. Our sub-teachers are in this because we don't employ sub-teachers. We hire them through the ESC. They're considered contracted service, and that totals $3.3 million a year. Prior to the pandemic, that was $1.6 million. So those rates have doubled. Our folks do a tremendous job attracting and filling those vacancies, but it does come at a cost. And then tuition to both Delaware Career Center, which is driven by the formula, which increased, as well as placement agencies when we place students in specialized programs, has seen an increase, and that totals $5.5 million. So that's really what's driving the increase in that line. We also are tough to find sub-OT, PT, and speech teachers when our folks are out, and so we've contracted with agencies for those. We also have a team of 12 mental health specialists that we've expanded over the years. Only about 7 of them are paid through the general fund. The other 5 are paid through ESSER and IDEA. And so that's why you see that number go up in the future years, because ESSER ends and we bring those folks back in. But our team of 12 mental health specialists fall in this line, as well as maintenance and utilities. Supplies and materials are pretty self-explanatory. We give buildings a budget per pupil. We give them a dollar amount of general per pupil, and then we give them weights for special ed, EL, economically disadvantaged, and then building principals have discretion. So that's about a third of this line, 2.4 million. And then we give Angie's team curriculum updates periodically. I think we have, when I looked at the schedule, science, math, ELA, and social studies. Some of those subjects are up for renewal. That's about $1 million. And then our bus fuel and things like that go into supplies. And we just assume a 3 to 5% inflationary increase into the future on those. Capital outlay, most capital outlay historically has been funded through bond issues and permanent improvement dollars. We've increased this forecast in this area for 2 reasons. From 24 to 26, we've increased for WEC improvements, so we have a little under $1.5 million each of the next 3 years. I believe we're starting with windows and roof, and then into maybe asphalt, interior, eventually lighting and HVAC. So you see money appropriated in 24, 25, and 26 for the WEC. And then we have this year $6 million to acquire a grounds maintenance facility that could also be used to house warehouse, provide bus capacity. $6 million is a number we've been carrying. I don't know in this market that it will get there, but we have it earmarked in there. If we don't spend it this year, we'll move it to next year, depending on what we can find. And we're scheduled to talk about that later. But those dollars are in here. And then we've also scheduled out 3 buildings for exterior sign replacement. We had great feedback from Linworth and Evening Street, and so we've put on a schedule to do 3 a year. And if my notes serve me, Wilson Hill Estates and maybe Brookside. Yes. All right. Those 3 are up this year. So that is all in capital outlay. And then lastly, other objects, out of the 2.5 million, 2.1 million is county auditor tax collection fees. That's the majority of that. We don't actually send out bills. The county treasurer does. They collect a fee for that. And with all the potential changes, we're very hopeful that they send them out on time this year. So changes over the 5 years, we've reduced salaries, 2 million. Really, that's because of we were cautious on our ESSER funds. We got about $13 million over the last 3 years. We specifically held some back in case needs arose. They didn't, and so we're able to use those 1 more year longer than anticipated on some of those salaries. The benefits is really the 2024 premium, saving 1.6 million annually, totals out to 6 million. And then the capital items were the increase in other areas. So all in all, $6.4 million increase over 5 years, less than 1% change in that line. So bottom line, what does all this mean? Well, when we look at, when we try to project and plan around levy cycling, you always want to look at 2 lines, right? You not only want to look at your unreserved fund balance, but you want to look at your surplus or more than likely deficit spending. Every district generally faces deficit spending. So that first double line there shows that we're taking in 5.1 million more than we're spending this year, 3.7 next year, and then we're about even the 3rd year. And that is about a year past where we thought we would be in the last forecast. And that's because of those revenue changes we made, right? But then in 27, we start to deficit spend, and it goes from 2 million to 10 million to 17 million to 24 million. We have about an $8 million run rate, right? So we're spending, our expenditures are growing about $8 million a year. It's pretty standard, 4 to 5%. But again, because that revenue plateaus, then that unreserved fund balance starts to decrease dramatically when you get into those outlying years. And so the graph at the bottom, the dots were the May forecast and the solid line is the current forecast. So you really, what you see is basically not a whole lot of change in revenue and expenses, and it pushed out our deficit spending from 26 to 27. So effectively, we got another year. What this means is I think I'm confident in saying we'll meet our campaign promise when we said this levy would last 4 years. We wouldn't be back on the ballot until at least 26 for operations. I think we can make that. We may be able to make that longer. Who knows? We've got 2 biennial budgets in there. We've got some property tax reform on our plates. But we're going to keep doing what we can on health insurance. And so we'll see. We don't have to make that decision right now or for a couple of years. But we're in a good place compared to where we projected to be. As with anything in life, right, we have risks and uncertainties. I thought my child would be a t-ball player at the age of 5. Instead, he's a snapping turtle soccer player. Well, we live and change, and so just like that with the forecast, we make assumptions about what's going to happen, and then we will redirect and assess when the time comes. So some of the major risks in this forecast are obviously property values. You're starting to see property values come down a little bit from their peaks, right? We had significant growth. They're starting to level off. We have this legislation hanging out there about if we should mechanically interfere with the reappraisal process, change the whole tax process, start over with 920. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But those are all assumptions that would impact us being heavily dominant on local property taxes. The next state budget and the school funding formula, will they continue, as we talked earlier, will they continue to increase the inputs, phase it in? What will be the impact of vouchers long term? We don't know. Will they be ruled unconstitutional? We don't know. And so all of that is an unknown. Again, I assume that STRS and SERS retirement system rates will remain steady, but that is a significant cost if those increase. And again, we'll see with our enrollment, not only with our phase 3 building plan, but operationally enrollment means a lot in terms of staffing levels. And so we'll see how enrollment plays out. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Who wants to start? Jennifer.
I'll start. I know at our last meeting, I think it was Amy mentioned the TAC committee meeting, that you had a very robust meeting with a lot of conversation. Was there anything that came up that they really questioned in this or were concerned about, or?
No, not to get in a whole levy planning mode, we had some discussion on fund balance, right? Our fund balance is higher than historically it has been. And whether you should use operating dollars for capital items or not. Historically, the answer to that has been no, for 2 reasons, really. One, voters vote for different levies for different reasons, right? When we tell voters, here's what this is for, operations versus capital. And many think that a building, a significant investment in a building that will be utilized over 30 or 50 years should be voted on as a matter of practice, right? So the flip side of that is we never had a fund balance as high as this. We're fortunate, we never thought the state was going to come through with pushing the Fair School Funding Plan like they have. And so should we look at utilizing some of these operational dollars for capital items? And I told the story that during the campaign, people told me, I'm voting for operations because I believe in teachers and having good programs, but I'm not voting for the bond issue because I think your buildings are just fine. And so there's danger in utilizing dollars that were committed to something. But at the same time, TAC, a good number of TAC said, but you've never been in this good financial position before. And so maybe that has changed. Many people believe taxes are taxes. They don't separate them. And as I said, they don't separate them when they come on your tax bill. So it was a good discussion. I don't think there were any questions about the assumptions. We had some discussion about property tax reform. Some on TAC think that nothing will change, that they'll increase the homestead and life will go on. So
Sounds good. Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Nikki?
Substance-wise, I don't really have any questions. I mean, I think we've reviewed and vetted everything from a finance committee standpoint, and I think I just want to express gratitude and the detail and the piece by piece approach to this, because there are a lot of pieces on both revenue and the expense side, and you've just laid it out in a very clear manner. So thank you.
Amy?
I'll just share a couple of notes from TAC too, back on your question, Jennifer. Just a few things. I think TJ summarized the majority of the conversation. I did write down a couple quotes of what people stated as we talked about, specifically related to like the next cycle of levy and bond issue. We talked about like that 2026 may be an unattractive moment due to the next Franklin County reappraisal. We talked about, and I don't remember exactly what the conversation was around this, but willingness to pay model, I think meaning that like what are people's thresholds for increased taxes? There was concern about taxes eventually forcing older community members out. And we talked too, related to that, just about what's happening regionally too, which are things that we can't control all of those because that's an impact that we're going to feel. And there was, I wrote down at one point the conversation, somebody said the whole point is to draw down the reserves and that we never had this much in reserves before. So those were just kind of a few of the, I mean, I literally have pages of notes from that meeting because we did talk about a lot of different things during that meeting. But I think, and speaking for myself, I mean, I think just we've talked about that cash balance that we've had for many years. I mean, I remember talking about it in 2018, maybe before that, but that's the memory that I have of talking about that. And I just think how we're projecting out and how that looks to the community and how, as you mentioned, are there opportunities to use some of that for capital, especially as we look at what we've already been through with the construction market in terms of what we've done thus far and looking at waiting however many more years down the road. And with all of the construction that's going to happen in the Central Ohio region and how that's going to impact us, and is there a balance there? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying I think that's going to be part of the conversation in the coming years.
And maybe you're right when we talked about it in the first task force, and we said it about the resources that we should be here. So you're right, it's been for some time, it's been quite amazing. And it seems like, just to piggyback on that, that would be part of the conversation that the next task force will be on. So that there's a recommendation that it's community driven with this bond.
yeah, I will just expand on that a bit. As far as the seniors and retirees living in their home, remaining in their homes, that is a concern, not just in Worthington and in general suburban school districts. That's why it's hopeful that they push the homestead exemption and pick up the tab for it. I always remind folks when they call me that the state of Ohio has cut income tax quite a bit, right? Quite a bit in the past 12 to 14 years. They eliminated the tangible business property tax. That has created jobs, no doubt. It has accelerated the Ohio economy, but seniors and retirees don't need new jobs. They don't need an income tax cut, right? And so when people ask me, how can I stay in my home? I say, well, you need to contact your congressperson and tell them what have you done for this particular avenue. Because we have, I mean, Ohio has done a good job of cutting income tax, spurring growth, but it's at the point now where it's at the detriment of some other populations, so.
Kelly?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for a very clear presentation. I think that was very well done, and thank you for meeting with me to go over this in advance. Just a few questions or points. First of all, I assume that DEW will now be identifying districts that are nearing fiscal distress since ODE won't exist anymore.
That's a good question. I know AOS, the Auditor State's Office, has a hand in it. It's a good question.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll never have to really know the answer to that question, but
Okay. Right. Yeah.
we'll figure it out
It is.
and look for it.
It will be interesting. You made a good point about House Bill 920 and the impact of reappraisal. Again, except for inside millage, which is quite small in our district. In some districts, it's a bigger amount, but in our district, it's rather small. We get no revenue gain as property values rise, other than inside millage. I don't want to be misleading. And I guess I want to go back. I think it was around 2012, something like that, when Jeff McEwen was treasurer and we had a levy on the ballot. And that would have been about 40 years after the passage of House Bill 920 and that its incorporation into the state constitution. His calculation showed that our millage was almost identical in 2010, 2014, somewhere in that, or it was around 2014.
Right, probably right in that
Yeah,
time.
almost exact. And yet we'd been on the ballot almost 30 times in that 40-year period. And so the whole point is we did all of that ballot work passing these. Some of them didn't pass, all to get us exactly right where we would have been but for House Bill 920.
It's an interesting study. Howard Fleeter, and he'll probably talk to you about it Friday if you go to that seminar. I heard him talk about it the other day, but he went back and looked at several districts from 72 or 76, whenever it was, what their tax rate was, to your point, and what it is now with inflation, and took away all the levies, what it would have been, and it was within a couple $100. And so the logical question is, this whole convoluted process of House Bill 920 is really not doing anything, but you end up in the same place. Is it really the best path? The flip side of that would be, but then my property taxes are going to go up without a vote, and people will have a hard time with that. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if something will come out of this reform subcommittee to that event or not, but you're exactly right. I mean, Howard did a study on that, and it was pretty similar.
Right. Now, as a result of reappraisal, one's property taxes may go up if their property values went up more than the average. If your property values only go up the average, your property taxes won't go up, even though they went up, your property values went up 35%. Or if your property values, which I don't think anybody hopes for, but if your housing goes up less than the average, only goes up 25%, your property taxes, school property taxes at least, will definitely go down. And again, that's a difficult thing to get across. I guess another point I think it's worth emphasizing is that in 2023, we got about $1,370 per child from the state, even though the state calculated the cost of educating a child as being about $8,200. So again, it underscores your point that most of our funding is done locally, not at the state level. And then my question is, not that I want to give anybody any ideas, but it's already been talked about down in Capitol Square, and that is, do you think it's possible that the state share of local property taxes might start to disappear?
Well, in 2013, that's what they did. They did it prospectively on new levies moving forward. I think it would be harder to pull the plug, because then, that was the whole House Bill 1. That was all mixed into House Bill 1. And so If the state's not going to pay that, then technically that gets assessed and it goes right back to the homeowner. So in theory, the school district will be held harmless. The homeowner would see a 12.5% increase in property taxes. So I don't think there's a lot of appetite for that. And so we'll see what they do with the homestead exemption expansion.
But what they could do is expand it, but
Not pay for it.
But not pay for it.
Correct.
I mean, they certainly have the constitutional power to do that.
Right. And so we'll see.
And in fact, they have, which was talked about last year, they have the power, obviously, not even to do it with a increase in the homestead exemption, but they could even.
I think
do it.
there are enough folks on the House Finance Committee that care about public ed that don't necessarily have school choice in regions of Ohio. Public education is the choice. And so I think there will be pushback on that. But again,
I hope you're right.
TJ, would I be correct, though, that if they expanded the homestead, didn't pay for it, that would then reallocate to everybody else in the school district, and they would have to pay for it? Because our millage is our millage.
I don't believe so. So the way the homestead works is you have a value, and right now, if you qualify, you're exempt 25,000 of your value. Right? So they set the millage based on the value, and then they come in and give the credit. And so I think the credit is after the millage is set. I could be wrong. I'll look for you. What they're thinking about doing, and rightfully so. So the homestead exemption was $25,000. So average home, $200,000, $25,000 provided relief. Right now, the average home, $350,000 or more, up to $500,000. $25,000 doesn't provide a lot of relief. And so they're looking at expanding that to $75,000, $100,000. But I don't believe, I believe that would be loss of dollars for us, but I could be wrong.
That's my understanding too, although like you.
I mean, they could write it, I suppose they could write it any way they wanted, but that is my understanding of how that particular credit works.
Okay, just two other quick points. First of all, the reason we have this, in my opinion, too large of unreserved fund balance is because we have been very conservative in our forecasts by making sure that revenues are not smaller than we're forecasting and that expenditures are not greater than we're forecasting. And I think that's a prudent, wise, fiscally responsible thing to do. And, but it just, and secondly, I think this board and this administration has done a great job of not using those unreserved fund balances for continuing expenses, because that's just, once you spend that money, it's gone. It's not like spending money from an operating levy, because we keep getting the operating levy money every year. But so I think we've been wise in doing that. And that gets to the point where we've had this little discussion. Philosophically, I am strongly opposed to using operating monies for capital improvements that are going to last many, many years. But I think that's a one-time expenditure, and I strongly support doing what your forecast said with respect to that. And getting to Amy's point, we certainly have not yet really felt the impact of what Intel and all the consequential things with respect to construction and demand and everything else. And I really think the sooner we get our maintenance barn situation taken care of, and the WEC needs it desperately, because you don't just let something deteriorate and degrade, and it's only going to get more expensive as more and more construction goes on. Nikki?
I literally considered recording the wind coming through the whistling through the windows as we're sitting here talking and meeting right now, because we've had this discussion so many times.
Right.
And yes, it does need the attention.
And
yes.
I went to the bathroom before the meeting. It looks like the ceiling's falling in the bathroom. There's debris everywhere around the sink and everything. So that's in the men's restroom at least. But we need to, this was, in my opinion, a wise investment. It was a very expensive investment. We got to keep it up. And those of us who are homeowners, if you don't maintain what you have, it's not going to last as long. So I really think it's a wise thing to do in our situation. And then to wrap it up, I'm still very, not that I think we should put in our forecast, but it's why we are very responsible in our forecasting, and that we got to keep some money in our unreserved fund balance, is I'm really concerned about the impact of vouchers on SERS and STIRS employer contribution to those funds. You said each 1% is about $1 million. Right now, that's only going to go, 1% is only going to be higher as wages go up or as our employment increases, as our enrollment increases. So that's really what makes it, you listed the risks there with a very cute picture, but I'm really worried about that one. I do hope the lawsuit is successful and vouchers are found to be unconstitutional. But if not, STIRS has made it very clear that it's going to have to raise employer contribution quite a bit over the next few years.
I will just add, if I can, regarding the fund balance too, keep in mind, we are unique in that we do incremental levies. And so
Right.
we have to have a larger fund balance in order to make that happen. If you look at a traditional district, waits till the third year, they're out of money, they ask for 6 to 8 mills, and if they don't get it, they make cuts. Well, if we wait till we're out of money in the third year, you can't do an incremental levy, right? You have to ask for enough to cover your deficit spending for at least a couple of years. And so if we're going to continue in that model of a smaller incremental levy, that does necessitate some level of higher unreserved balance.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. And frankly, I opposed incremental levies the first time it came on because I was worried about what the public reaction would be to that. But they've been very well received in our district, and fiscally, financially, they make sense because our revenues go up during that period while our expenses go up, as opposed to revenues staying flat as our expenses go up to it. But I still, this is for future boards, I would urge you to continue to follow the mantra that I think we've had in effect for a large part of the time I was on the board, or been on the board, and that is reasonable levies at regular intervals. I know it's very tempting to push a levy off a year or to make it a little smaller, but the impact is the following levy either has to be quicker and more, or usually both. And that's where we got in trouble in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s of passing, or actually having levies defeated because they were coming too close together and they were way too high. So, great presentation. We will be voting on this later on when we get to Treasurer's new business. Okay, and I guess under Robert's rules, discussion would be appropriate there, but I think we've done a very good job. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you, TJ, for a great presentation. At this time, we're ready for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. So the mission of Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. In Worthington, we have 4 vision statements. So for this report, I'd like to provide an update in each vision area. Our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. So as you're aware, at Thomas Worthington, we're actively planning for the first 13 days next year, the 24-25 school year, to look different at Thomas due to the construction of the new academic wing. So while we don't yet know what that will look like for school as of yet, I do want to report that Mr. Scully has created a team of administrators, teachers, and students to brainstorm how that start may work. They've created multiple scenarios and are currently evaluating each one. They met before this meeting today. So stay tuned, no updates yet, but I do want the community to know that we're actively working on that start for next school year. The second vision statements will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. Some of you have asked about our plans for the solar eclipse on April 8th. At this point, we're planning internally for an early release on that day, with the plan to get all students and staff home before total darkness. So the plan would be for a 7:40 to noon early elementary school plan, an 8:10 to 12:30 late elementary, 8:40 to 1 o'clock high school plan, 9:10 to 1:30 middle school plan. There would be no PM kindergarten on that day, and there would be no PM preschool. So my plan at this point is to wait to see how all of this eclipse planning unfolds. with the goal on making a final decision for April 8th by March 1st. But I do want to put out publicly that we are planning for an early release on that day. The eclipse on April 8th is on our radar. So know that we're thinking about that. Our third vision statements will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. We've held 6 different community coffees this fall in an effort to engage with interested community members. Our final community coffee for 2023 is scheduled for Friday, December 8th at 8 a.m. here at the Worthington Education Center. Our special guest will be none other than Treasurer TJ Cusick. So if you have questions about tonight's 5-year forecast, about taxation, reappraisal, development, or how Worthington spends our resources, we'd love to talk with you on December 8th. So you'll see that come across in our announcements, but one more this calendar year. And then finally, we'll be responsible and transparent with our community resources is our 4th vision statement. We will be back before the Worthington Architecture Review Board on December 14th for a second review of the new natatorium. So the community might be interested in that. The exterior has been significantly redesigned based upon feedback from the first ARB meeting. So it's now designed to look more like the field house and the new Thomas Worthington and less like the McConnell Arts Center. If things go well, we'll be able to bid the project in January. The Board of Education will be asked to approve those bids in February. We expect around a $15 million investment in the natatorium. Construction should begin by April, and we're expecting about a 20-month build out for that project. So that project is moving along, and hopefully we have more to share with that in the new year. Dr. Wilson, that's my report.
Thank you very much. Kelly.
I don't usually have a question, but so you talked about the first 13 days and Mr. Scully putting a team together. Do you know if he's included parents in that?
Kelly, off the top of my head, I don't know. I will have to
Okay.
ask Mr.
Okay.
Scully about the composition of that committee.
Okay. And then the eclipse, just so people know that it's not just like a regular eclipse, like we're like a point where it's going to be complete darkness, and so that will attract a lot of outside visitors to our city, right? And so it's not just because we want to let kids go home early because it's going to be a little dark. It's also going to be a lot of traffic, and so we're going to be a really big hot spot for that time period. Just to reiterate that. Also, I'd like to join you for your coffee on the 8th. That's it.
Great.
I'll make a quick additional comment. At the PTSO meeting, Principal Scully mentioned the team that he has put together. I believe it is internal because a lot of it is very much logistics oriented, how they can teach, what is the best way to teach, given students, given classes, how they put classes together, how they put grades together, everything. It came up at the PTSO meeting though as well that I thought is worth sharing publicly when we know that so that our public knows not only are we actively working, or as Principal Scully and his team actively working on best positioning us, but the construction team is actively working to best position us. I mean, he didn't go into great detail, but he did give a few examples of when something is ahead of schedule and the weather is right and they can, move on to something else, whether it's enclosing an area so HVAC can go in earlier than planned. But essentially, that is a very complex puzzle where they are constantly looking at, given everything that's going on and where certain parts of the project are, the weather environment, the industries that they have to pull in, whether it's HVAC or something else, like anything that they can do to advance the project holistically, piece by piece, they are doing as we move along. So I just think that's an important thing for our community at large to hear as well.
Just a couple of points real quickly. First of all, on the solar eclipse, I've mentioned it to a few people, and it's gotten of possibly letting school out early. It's gotten some ridicule, and Kelly, I really appreciate your comments. I do have a question. Do we I didn't go through and look at your link. You sent us a link on it Monday, but how long will it be dark? Do we know? I'm not asking you to be
Yeah, no, I
astrology.
don't know the exact amount of time that it's going to be dark. Kelly's correct. If you look at the path of the eclipse, I do believe around 3 o'clock, 3:15 somewhere was total darkness. The north west side of Columbus is supposed to be in that path. The Ohio Department of Education has advised schools to change schedules, right? So, we are one of a few districts that will probably be open. Dublin will be closed on that day. I think all of Delaware County has closed school on that day. Delaware County made their decision based on the eclipse. So all the school districts in Delaware County often collaborate on those decisions. Dublin is closed separately from the eclipse, like it was already in their calendar. We would prefer to stay open and have some school on that day, which is why we're investigating the early release. It's been a decade since we've done an early release in Worthington, and we've never done an early release with our new schedule. And so, as we all know, we started new start and end times at all of our schools last school year. So this would be we had to actively say, how do we run an early release? What would that look like? What can we do? And then it's not just an early release. We want all of our buses and families off the roads with enough time to spare. So if we release at 1:30, everybody should be home by 2 o'clock, which gives a little bit an hour cushion. Because remember, we need a half an hour to run those routes. So we think that'll work. We think we can run some school. Now, when I said, I'd like to wait till March 1st to make a final decision. If it turns out that everybody else around us decides that we're not going to be in school and we have a really light winter, then maybe it makes sense to make the same decision. I'd rather wait to see how some of this plays out before we make a final decision. I feel like March 1st gives people in the community enough time to plan for what's going to happen on April 8th. I don't feel like that's a decision that has to be made today. Upper Arlington did modify their school district calendar, I think at their last board meeting, to move to an early release on that day. So they plan to be in school but have an early release. They wanted to go ahead and make that decision. I wouldn't criticize that. If you guys are okay with it, would like to wait through the winter months, see how this plays out before we make a final decision. But what I do want the community to know is I don't foresee that there's any chance that we have a full school day on that day. We're currently planning for it to be an early release on that day. But March 1st would be the time where I'd say is the date that we need to make sure we let everybody know for sure what's happening on April 8th.
Thank you. That's very helpful because I have heard from people without kids that, what the heck, you can't hold school just because it's dark. But Kelly and Dr. Barrows appreciate.
Well, in fairness, Dr. Wilson, that was totally my reaction. It was totally, we're going to school. Of course we're going to school. But I have learned. You learn and you grow,
right.
and when you learn more, you do different things.
And when you hear neighboring districts are doing something, it has an impact. But no, and my final thank you is that, thank you, board members. This was my vision when I laid out the hope of having superintendent's reports and treasurer's reports, that it would encourage a chance for us to talk, because we are prohibited by state law from talking like this, except in an open meeting like this. We can't get together and do this. So thank you for a provocative report, and thank you all for doing this. Whether you all continue this in January is for you all to decide. I hope you do, but that's your decision. But thank you. Now then, Mr. Cusick, treasurer's report. I know you've already said a lot that you had to say, but I'm sure you have more to say.
Well, I have to hold something back for the community coffee, so the only thing I will add is that we do expect the Senate to take up property tax reform this week, so I will let everyone know what that entails. April 8th, the solar eclipse day, is the day we run payroll, so I'll be sure we run pay before 3 o'clock.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Now, are there any?
Wait.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll continue the discussion when they give their reports, because you mentioned the property tax reform. Are you on a committee to help look at that? Or are you still on that committee?
Yeah, so OASBO, our association, solicit is probably not the right word, got probably 15 or 20 treasurers from around the state to be on a subcommittee to answer questions and help educate the 10 members of the legislature that are on. So I think there's 6 House members, 6 Senate members. They were just announced. But so then we're going to work collaboratively with them to help explain some of this and what the impacts are. Really, I've said this before, the 20 mil floor is really what's at the heart of this. Districts that are on the 20 mil floor, that their tax rate is only a total of 20 mils, which aren't suburban districts, but are 300 to 400 districts across the state, all of their mills grow. And so when you have reappraisal this high, then that is a meaningful increase in their property tax bills. And that's really what's driving a lot of this. And so it's a good makeup from around here. Myself, Andy Geisfeld from Upper Arlington, but there's folks from all over the state. So if the committee goes through, we're set up to help advise them.
Well, I think we probably all appreciate that and feel better knowing that you're there to help guide them. So thank you for doing that.
I'll do my best.
And do you think there's a chance we can get the legislature to wait until the commission gets a chance to analyze all this before making?
I think if we, Friday you'll hear, it's interesting, the whole reappraisals. County auditors are split on this, right? And Matt Nolan is vocal. He's speaking Friday. They're of the opinion, look, the market value of a property is what it is. There's rules that appraisers must follow. If you want to change the tax part of the equation, then you change the tax part, not the value part. The value is the value, right? So county auditors have been vocal that this is a nonsense bill, this 187, and using 3-year averages. So I think if we can get through this hump over the next month, then I do think they'll let it play out and go a year and try to look at reform and what that subcommittee does. It's just a matter of there are some folks who are very impacted and want an immediate change right now before these bills go out. And my biggest concern now is those bills go out late because you can't that takes a long time. Franklin County is a large county, and so it takes a long time to change rates, to adjust to lower values and get bills out on time. For income tax purposes, a lot of people like to pay in December. So I don't think that at this point they could make that happen. I think they might be able to make it happen with the homestead exemption because it's a credit on the back end. I don't know, that might even delay things. But what people don't realize, yes, we talked about we have a $100 million unreserved balance, but that is significantly invested, right? We don't just sit on our money. And in a rising interest rate environment, those investments from a market value lessen. So if I would have to liquidate an investment, I never intend to do that. I'm going to hold it. But if interest rates have gone up, my investment on a market value is worth less, then the district loses money if I have to liquidate an investment early. So from my standpoint, that's the biggest concern, is that we're going to impact the tax billing system and the timing of all that. So I think if we get through this hump, we'll be okay, but we'll see.
Okay. Do your best. Thank you, Jennifer. And also, to round it all out, House Bill 920, while it's a tremendous benefit to our district or our homeowners in our district and other districts similar to this, anybody who's on the 20 mil floor, House Bill 920 means nothing. Their taxes always go up just as property values go up. And so it's all very interrelated, which is why it shouldn't be done on the fly, but be done after careful consideration. Any board or committee reports or announcements?
I have one. Did you want to go? We had a SPAC committee meeting on November 20th, which is the first time we've met. Emily got welcomed to the group as she was leading the meeting for the first time for that group. So we just had some discussions about talking about coaches, both district paid coaches, and then also we didn't really talk too much about booster funded coaches, but just about kind of looking at the analysis of historical as to what has happened over time. So I think that group is going to circle back to that conversation at their next meeting, which I don't know if you, first of the year, March, yeah. So that will be for a new SPAC committee to take up that conversation, because Charlie and I will not be on the committee any longer. So anyways, that's all I have.
Thank
Amy,
you.
did you guys talk at all about the new mental health training requirements for coaches?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. I'll just share, Emily and I had a conversation after I attended a session at OSBA related to that, and just that there is a new requirement for mental health training for coaches that will be incorporated into the training that we currently provide them, and will be something that would be provided at the beginning of the season versus like something that they could complete throughout the season. The state does not require it to be done at the beginning of the season. It's something that the state requires to be done throughout, but obviously wanting a coach to have that training because of how significantly that impacts the impact that they have on students we would be better served. We just talked about better served at having it done at the beginning of the season.
Is it for this school year or next school year?
The requirement, I actually don't remember off the top of my head. I felt like it was for this
For
school year as we were
currently.
talking about it in OSBA. Yeah, but don't hold me to that. So,
I did have one other thing.
Go for it.
Did you have something else? No, you're good. I just wanted to share that I did walk Thomas Worthington this afternoon. So Jeff Eblay and Matt from Versili took me out for a tour. So I know Jennifer's going on Wednesday. So if you have an opportunity to go out and check it out, it is kind of cool to see what's going on right now. And there's going to be a lot happening in the coming weeks too. So I think that the community is excited to see all of that coming out of the ground and as it really takes shape. So that's all I had.
Thank you. And just to circle back real quickly on the mental health training for coaches, there are two concerns that impact us. First of all, who pays for it? Are we going to require the coaches to pay for it, or is the district going to pay for it?
no, my understanding, and Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's part of the training that we provide them. It will be part of the training, or is part of the training now that we make accessible to them, not something that is an additional expense
okay.
that we task them with.
All right. Do all districts do
It's a
training
new
of that
state
sort?
requirement.
Right, no, but do all districts do that training? Because I understood it was going to be outside vendors mostly doing the training.
Oh, I didn't mean to
In other
say that we
districts.
actually were doing it, but we were providing it. So
Okay.
maybe it's an outside vendor that we're working through, but okay, Trent's
So,
shaking his
in any
head.
event, we're going to
Yes.
absorb the costs, okay.
Incorporated
To
into
accept
the
this.
training
All
that we
right.
currently provide, I guess I should say, through outside vendors.
And then there's, to those, some districts are concerned that it's going to make it even harder for them to find coaches, especially assistant coaches, either because they don't want to incur, the coaches don't want to incur any costs, or they don't want to spend extra time. But, yeah, but I think it's a good idea in concept, but we'll see how it rolls out. Anything else, Nikki?
You know, I don't have anything since the last meeting, but I will just share, I realized that I did attend a student feedback session in October that as it occurred, the meeting thereafter, I wasn't present here,
Okay.
and so I didn't have the opportunity to share some of the feedback that was shared by the students, which was, I would say, like 99.9% positive. You know, I think that we in our district all know what a special place Linworth is, but just a few of the comments I will share are that, you know, they talked about how students felt really seen there. They feel very accepted. They also feel that they are pushed beyond what they feel like they are in some of their traditional high school classes, appropriately so. From an academic standpoint, it's focused less on memorization and more focused on complex topics. They feel like their classes go more in depth, and just very positive feedback from that community with regards to the environment there and the teachers and the program holistically. So it's just a very good reminder that that is a special program that we have and one to be cherished.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Just real quick, I want to thank Angie and the whole team of administrators for the final Portrait of a Learner meeting. Not last week, but the week before, right after our last meeting. I got lots of comments from people that were involved that were just very thankful to be part of the group. So appreciate the work on that. And I know people are looking forward to kind of the final results, which will be March 13th at the State of the Schools. Is that correct?
Yes, you have to come to March 13th, State of the Schools with Kilbourne High School that evening. More information coming out, but mark your calendars, March 13th for the big reveal.
Okay, and then my other thing is the library liaison. I had sent you all the information about their trustee, and I'll just make a couple comments when that vote time comes. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Jennifer. Kelly?
Well, since it's only been a week and a half.
And 3 days off
and
school.
Thanksgiving in between. The one thing I did attend, like Jennifer said, was the last portion of Learner. I'm glad I didn't say graduate. It says graduate there. I like that every step. I got to see 3 out of the 4, so I appreciate being invited and included into that discussion, and just the breakdown of how everything just comes together and what our community, right, sees and wants to see from our students. So we broke down the competency description feedback. There was some brainstorming about how it will be rolled out. Of course, March 13th will be revealed. So I just appreciate the time and effort that I know that you took, and I appreciate all the community members that were there. I mean, the evenings were nice every time, and they were still there. And so I appreciate that people came out and were very engaged. I mean, the room was not quiet. And so I appreciated that engagement. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Kelly. And I just want to pile on to the Portrait of a Learner because the feedback I got was from community members, from teachers, and from administrators. And again, this was on weeknights. Actually, were all really nice nights as well. They universally, among the people I heard from, and I wasn't doing any scientific polling, was what a wonderful experience this has been. A chance for teachers, administrators, and community members to sit down around a table and talk about really important things, education here. And that included community members who have no kids in school anymore, or maybe never had kids in school, and people who have kids right in school right now. It was just, and usually teachers, especially on something like this, they roll their eyes when I asked them, how was it? These teachers were ecstatic. They said, I got to talk to people all across the district that I wouldn't get a chance to talk to. And I don't know where to take that, but I think there is an appetite for community members, teachers, administrators to get together and talk, not just to chit chat, but to talk about important things about the future of this school district and the future of learning and so forth. I personally witnessed just the enormous appetite for that. So, and then secondly, I think I already did this at the last meeting with respect to student feedback, but to follow up on what Nikki said, at the Thomas Worthington sessions I attended, the feedback again was overwhelmingly positive. I understand it's not like Linworth, and the students volunteering their tremendous affection for it. I think that's the right word for the security monitors. It was just, but I think I said last time, the principals have done a great job of getting a real cross-section of our students, not just the student council folks or the valedictorians, but the whole skew. So, okay. That's all I have. I think we are now ready, Mr. Cusick, for actions that you recommend.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the minutes that are included in enclosure E1, please.
May I have a motion to approve the amendments of the November 15th board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, changes, modifications? Okay, if not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
I'll abstain as I was not there.
The minutes of the November 15th board meeting are approved. Mr. Cusick, appropriations.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the following appropriation modifications as outlined in the agenda. This is one of the 2 to 3 times a year where this doesn't net out to zero. For the general fund, that is because we are aligning the budget with the 5-year forecast that was just presented. So you see a reduction in wages and benefits, an increase in services for maintenance and tuition, an increase in capital outlay related to WEC improvements, and an increase in dues and fees related to tax collection fees. So overall, increasing the budget $6,031,000. Again, aligns with the 5-year forecast. And then down below, we have all our other funds. Mostly these are grant funds from 400 down. The state gives us a grant entitlement at the beginning of the year and then adjusts it twice a year based on enrollment and demographic changes. And so you see changes to state grant allocations. The big two in here are $366,000 in the permanent improvement fund. So and this is aligns with line 19, a grant award from AEP. So we, at the very end of last year, it actually didn't hit the rolls until this year, got a grant for an electric bus from AEP, about $250,000. They called us and offered us additional grant dollars, I think $492,000. That's why it totals up to $747,000. So they awarded us an additional close to $500,000. And so the local contribution, because we've already bought our 7 buses out of this year's permanent improvement dollars, we're asking for an increase, which is basically an advance of next year's bus fund. So we'll only buy 5 diesel buses next year to take advantage of this grant before the end of the year. So you see an increase in Fund 03. That EV buses, they're generally about $65,000 above the cost of an electric bus. And I think the jury is still out on EV, so I think this will allow us to have 3 electric buses that we'll be able to test and operate ourselves as that technology gets better and make informed decisions about where our fleet is headed. So that's why you see that increase in recommendation there. And the others are self-explanatory. So motion to approve appropriations as outlined in the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the appropriations modifications recommended by the treasurer. Is there any discussion, questions, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
The board approves the appropriations modifications. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the 5-year forecast as presented by our treasurer earlier in the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the 5-year forecast as presented, both in the enclosure to F1 as well as the presentation that was made earlier in the meeting. Any further questions, comments, discussion? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
We've approved the 5-year forecast. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items G2 through G12 in your agenda. Recommendation to approve the consent agenda, G2 through G12, please.
May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? If not, Mr. Cusick, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes. Dr. Bowers.
Thank
new
you.
business.
I'd like to recommend the Board of Education approve the single donation in item H1 on your agenda. Item H1, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the donation on the agenda in H1. Any discussion, comments, questions? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H2. Item H2 is the authorization to purchase the competitive retail natural gas service from the lowest responsible bidder submitted to Meta Solutions for the period commencing July 2025, terminated no later than 2030. So we want to be able to bid out our natural gas. That's item H2, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we authorize the purchase of natural gas from the lowest responsible bidder pursuant to the resolution that is attached to our agenda. Any questions, comments, discussion? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passes authorizing the resolution, or approving the resolution. At this time, actions recommended by the Board of Education. The first item is the appointment of the Worthington Library Trustee. First, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the appointment recommended to us by the Library Board. And it's something that the law requires that we do, even though we have no input on the selection, and she will not be serving on our board. But actually, she is a former student of mine, and I highly recommend her. We have a motion, yeah.
Yeah.
Second, any other discussion, Jennifer?
I'll just make a few comments. I shared with all of you, all of the applications and Kyla's application and kind of the comments from the governance committee at the library, but I just thought I'd publicly read a few comments that they had said about Kyla and why they chose her, because if you looked at the applications, you know, there was a whole slew of great people to do this, and I know it was a difficult decision for them when they've got so many good candidates, but they think that Kyla will bring the board a unique perspective because she has worked as a teacher and now an attorney. And when I read that, I wondered if she had been one of your students. So that's interesting, yeah, that you know her. She has a broad view and policy-focused approach. She's service-oriented. She's well-prepared in her understanding of the library and its role in the community, and her core values strongly align with those of the library. So I think that we are very happy to welcome her to the library board, and this is one of our two duties of the Worthington Library, being a school district library, that we approve a trustee each year, and we need to approve their budget each year. Once again, we don't really have any say in it, but we need to approve it, so.
And just to pile on a little bit, Julie Keegan and Mark Scheer used to attend my education law course when I was teaching it when she was a student, and they were very impressed with her at that time. Again, she had that background of already being a teacher before she ever went to law school, but I think she'll be an outstanding trustee on the library board. But
Great, thank you.
Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion passes. We approve the library board's selection of a new trustee.
Will Jen email
We send
them
them, yes.
tomorrow? That
Yeah. Good.
it's all taken care of? Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Okay, the next item again is board, and I apologize for, I wasn't trying to slip it in, but my schedule did change. The school finance workshop is one I've gone to every year since I've been on the board. Actually, we even went to it in the December before I was even formally appointed to the board at the urging of Mark Scheer. I didn't go during the COVID time. I think it was online.
It's online.
Free. Yeah. If anyone else wants to go, certainly, it's a very educational day. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve my registration to attend the school finance workshop. Questions, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you call the roll?
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Motion passes. Any questions, requests, concerns from the board? I just want to say that I'm thankful for all the engagement we've had in this board meeting. It prolongs it a little bit, but I really think it's important that we talk, and I hope it continues in the next year. With respect to the calendar, the last board meeting of the year, also the last board meeting that Amy and I will be at is, again, the second Monday of December at our regular time, same location right here. And that will be our last scheduled, at least. We don't have any plans for any other board meetings before December 31st. And then the first meeting of 2024 is scheduled for January 8th. And I don't believe Ohio State's football team will pose any kind of a conflict for that day. I could be wrong. I suppose there could be all kinds of upsets, but I rather doubt it. I can't see a road forward. But
Charlie.
that's scheduled to begin a half hour early for the organizational meeting, and then the regular meeting will start at 6:30. And I believe ever since we went to live stream, instead of just going into it, we've waited till 6:30.
Yeah.
In the past, we used to just go into it, but I won't be around for that. So
Charlie, I would just note on the 11th, hopefully everyone will be able to join us early at 5:45 for a bit of a celebration to express our gratitude for your service and for Amy's service on the board.
okay, did Amy and I know about that? Okay, all right, that's a surprise. Okay, 5:45.
Yes.
Okay, I'll have to see if I can adjust my tip. No, just kidding. All right. At this time, I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the purchase of property for public purposes and the sale of property at competitive bidding, or the sale or disposition of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit for use property under the revised code 505.10. May I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion about going into executive session? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes. And again, we will come out of that meeting to adjourn, but I promise, we will not do any voting. We will not have any discussion. We will not have any voting after the end of the executive session. You're free to hang around to watch us adjourn, but nothing's going to happen other than adjourning. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful holiday season, everyone, and anyone wants to.